Hey everybody, it's Khara Crosswick Brindle. Welcome back to the channel. Ashley's back with us. Hi, Ashley.
Hello.
We have a bunch of videos planned, so don't be surprised as you see Ashley's face on the channel. She's a wealth of knowledge, and I am grateful, Ashley, that you're here. As always, you always have so many good nuggets to share. So this video is really about looking at working in systems, community mental health agencies. Like I work with students, I know you have supervisees, and we're having these conversations regularly, which is like, what's the benefit of working in those systems? And maybe what are some of the challenges? So for
Mhm.
viewers, this is what our video is about today. We both have lived experience in these systems, and we're going to call out some things for your consideration. So, Ashley, for folks who haven't caught you on a previous video, quick little blurb about you.
Yeah, I'm Ashley. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a licensed addiction counselor and an approved clinical supervisor. I have a private practice and I work with both offenders and victims. And I also have a very small caseload at this point of supervisees.
Yeah, you have a lot of things going on. Like, this is why we
Yeah,
connect so well.
always. Yeah.
So, to kick off this conversation, is it worth describing what we think about when we say agency? So, I know you had named offline some ideas. What do you want listeners or viewers to hear about this?
I think when we look at the definition of agency in this video, it's a large organization. So, community mental health center, hospital, Department of Human Services setting, probation or parole setting, any very, very large group practice as well.
Yeah. And for me, it was a big nonprofit. So it worked with CPS and all of that, but like was a nonprofit entity itself with many, many clinicians in different
Mhm.
locations. So for folks watching, we're not going to be like, we're going to drill down into the details of each and every one of those systems. But I think there are things that I'm telling my students and that Ashley is telling her supervisees to consider of like,
Mhm.
there's a lot of value here, even though it's kind of a stressful system to be in. So we're going to look at both sides of that coin, I
Yeah.
think, together. So where should we start? Pros, cons? What do you think?
Let's start with pros. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So you've worked in multiple systems. I've only worked in two off the top of my head in the state that I'm in right now. Like, oh, what have I done for the last 12 years?
I know.
Uh, but when you think about the systems, the communities that you've been a part of, what would be some of the things that felt like gifts that you took away, things that helped you in your career so far?
I think one major gift is structure. So, looking at policies, procedures, very formal things in place for documentation, treatment planning, case conceptualization. Um, and that can also include things like organizational charts, dress codes, guidelines about working with clients, to more serious things like what to do in emergencies.
Hmm.
So when we look at how organizations could or should operate, who has decision-making power? How does funding work? Who do you go to as your first line of support? How do multidisciplinary teams work together? And I think that's a huge pro. Like those are lots of things to learn and implement in future settings when you have that knowledge. And I also recognize that things break down really quickly when policies and procedures are not executed or upheld.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm kind of having a flashback to like the high turnover in some of these systems,
Mhm.
just naturally with like people moving on or doing something different. But in the same place of gratitude, like I feel like it taught me the policy of what is a critical incident, the procedure
Mhm.
for suicide assessment,
Right.
and mandated
Right.
reporting, and some of these things that we learn in grad school but don't actually have
Mhm.
experience in yet. So I could feel a lot of gratitude in this video for those things of like, our supervisees, our students have no idea yet, power of the
Mhm.
word yet. But these systems usually have a policy and procedure about that, which makes that feel a little less daunting that there's support in place for it.
And going off of that, these larger organizations recognize the importance of risk management and crisis management. This could be a client who's suicidal, like you said. It could be an aggressive client. It could be a family who suddenly lost housing. It could be your coworker called out sick and now you have to cover their whole caseload for the day, groups that night. And it could be the internet's out in the building, right? Like problem solving tons of different things. And going through those things are not fun. And sometimes they're very difficult or stressful in the moment or even traumatic. But an agency allows us to learn how to deal with all sorts of those situations as they come
Mm-hmm.
up. And again, I don't want people to experience a lot of stress or trauma, certainly, but recognizing it's so different than seeing lower acuity clients once a week for an hour in an outpatient setting. And so if you
Right.
kind of jump right into private practice, do you know what to do if one of those things came up?
Right, right. Of like, have you even created your own policy around this, or
Mhm.
like steps you're going to take, or have a consultant or supervisor, or whatever that looks like?
Mhm.
Yeah, I know we talked offline and you kind of touched on that just now. Of there's always an opportunity for private practice. Like I think
Yeah,
you and I can just
always.
say like that's always a thing. Like you can always
Mhm.
join a private practice. You can always start a private practice if that's
Mhm.
something you're called to do. But to have these like specialized opportunities, these settings where this kind of work can be done, where you're not necessarily always working with this population, or it feels like a more, I don't know, acute population to work with. Like I think there's something so powerful about that that really helps us grow as a clinician. And so one of my students just asked that recently, and I was like, yes, go into this system that she wanted to work in, because it was like this or private practice. And I was like,
Mhm.
private practice will always be there. Like you're
Always.
asking to outright my opinion. This is my opinion. Please do what you want. But I think having that reassurance that like private practice is always an option helps people when they make these decisions of where do I go, especially coming out of graduate school.
I agree. And I think sometimes these organizations, the mentality is sink or swim. And I don't necessarily agree with that approach, but also recognizing there is something to learn about multitasking or managing a high caseload and different types of clients. You know,
Mm-hmm.
what task or client do I tackle first today? We all have our weeks planned out, and then there's an emergency with a client or something needs to be addressed on your campus or in the building. You need to call a client's mom back, or member of the team is like, hey, we need to hop on a call immediately. And so recognizing there is something to learn about flexibility and prioritizing and problem solving in an agency that we just don't get in the private practice setting, at least not often.
Right, right. I think along with this, things that pop in my head is like quality supervision. I mean, like
Mhm.
hopefully quality supervision. We can't speak to every agency having that, but like it's built in. So there's that support
Mhm.
system that you're kind of
Yeah.
naming there. It was also opportunity to get exposure to trainings I wouldn't have necessarily pursued
Yeah.
myself if I'd gone
Mhm.
straight into private practice. Of like,
Mhm.
we're all going to do an EMDR. We're all going to go do this on diversion and mandated clients of like how to work with them. Like some really cool trainings that I didn't have on my radar if I hadn't worked in that setting.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, which I think is another pro of like this also helps us network. I think you and
Yes.
I can agree, like
Absolutely.
if we worked in an agency, we also met lots of different kinds of people,
Yeah.
other professionals that now in private practice we can say, hey, I remember you. Do you remember me? Or let's
Mm.
connect or let's refer, which was a different
Yeah.
video for anyone who's watching this
Yeah.
channel. But you know, like that also comes from these bigger systems that we work within versus just private practice.
I agree. I agree. And I tell that to my supervisees who are in a large organization, and maybe that's not where they want to be long term, but recognizing in 5 years, you could have a private practice client who suddenly needs something, and you're going to remember back to 5 years prior. Oh, yeah, I remember this organization I referred this client to, or I remember this probation officer told me about this resource. And so a lot of that knowledge just becomes ingrained over time,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just not exposed at the same level in smaller agencies or private practice.
Yeah, I just had a flashback as you said that. I remember having a binder of resources and people's business
Yep.
cards and
I
names.
still have mine.
I don't have it in that form anymore, but I remember when I built my group practice, like when they had those questions, I was literally whipping out this binder, being like, this person, take a picture of this card. Like
Yep.
it was so easy because I built so many connections through that setting. So that's fascinating. I haven't thought about that in like years and years. But as we're talking, it's like very vivid in my mind right now. So obviously, to keep this in balance, we don't want to just champion agencies. We also want to talk about the edges. You started alluding to some of it, which is systems can break down. I alluded to maybe it's poor supervision. That is part of my lived experience. Leadership trauma, which is a different endeavor I'm working on right now. So, like, what would you say are some of the challenges that you're tracking?
I would say high caseloads. That's just not sustainable for most people. And that's why we do see a lot of burnout. I would say multiple roles, like along with high caseloads, being expected to not just see your clients, but do all of this and all of this and all of this. Um, I would say people work over 40 hours a week very frequently in those settings, which has its own, relationship to burnout and exhaustion and
Right.
physical symptoms, et cetera. Um, and like you said, leaders can really make or break it.
Mhm.
There's some leaders that have been there 20 years and they are on it and they are fabulous at some of these organizations. And then there's some leaders who either aren't present or don't have the same lens that you have. And so it's not a great fit. And so supervision isn't really productive. And so recognizing, the team can influence whether your experience is largely positive or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why the stat shows up in business across the board, regardless of
Yeah.
industry, of like, what does leadership look like if management is awful? People don't
Mhm.
stay, people don't get what they need, people don't grow. And obviously, as supervisors, you and I want our people to grow, whoever we're working with, supervisee or student. Um, so yeah, I think that that's probably one of the biggest edges is like, along with burnout and being overworked, is what does leadership and management expect? Is there high admin expectations of like you're doing all that for free, you're doing that on top of a 40-hour work week? So there's a lot there, I think, to think about. What are we missing? What else is coming up?
We talked about leadership. I think the acuity. I mean, some of these settings, the clients are so, so acute. I'm thinking about my own experience in a hospital where you just see a lot of scary or unsafe situations all the time. And some of us have the tolerance for that, and some of us don't. And I think some larger organizations think they're in a lower acuity population, but then when, I've seen supervisees start, for example, and the population they're serving is much higher acuity than they were led to believe. And so I think, again, in a large organization, you got to be prepared for anything. And
Mhm.
sometimes that's too much for people. And we shouldn't expect people to be able to respond to anything or everything all the time.
Right. I think that leads to burnout. It's like the straight
Absolutely.
recipe for that. I also think of it as the big five fears of our careers, which is a training I put together last year with my colleague. A lot of those things happened, at least for me, when I was in an
Yeah.
agency.
Yep.
And so, like, I feel like now as a mental health leader, it has informed my ability to hold space and support
Mhm.
someone else who's gone through them. But yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. And there was definitely a point where I was like, do I really want to do this? Like, do I want to
Mhm.
be in this field? But because I
Mhm.
had solid leadership, I was able to navigate it and grow from it. But yeah,
Mhm.
like there's like this whole make or break with leadership and acuity, that it's like if you have the poorest of poor in both of those categories, I mean, this is probably why we have people burn out in 7 years
Right.
in our field.
Mhm.
So obviously there's a lot here for viewers to be thinking about, especially if we have people watching who are making some decisions about where they're headed next. Of, am I going into a group practice? Am I going into an agency? Am I working for a nonprofit? Am I working for a school? As just some examples, what's one final thought you have for folks as they consider this?
My final thought is wherever you land, understand the importance of systems and community resources. So, whether you're in private practice, group practice, schools, hospitals, community mental health, make sure you know how your community works and what is available as other resources for the clients that you're serving.
Mhm. Yeah, that you don't have to do this alone, truly. Like
Right.
there's hopefully support and resources in the network in place. I like that. I think that's so critical for people to succeed in an agency setting, that it's leadership and what else do we do to help them grow. So folks, if you have thoughts for us, please come below the video. Let us know if you are, I mean, this is oversimplified, but like, do you champion agency work or do you champion a private practice? Ashley and I have served in all these different
Done
settings.
both.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so like we're biased, but like maybe not completely. I don't know. But let us know your thoughts in this video. We have other ideas for you going forward. But yeah, I think we can agree that there is a benefit to considering agency work, and we
I
hope that
agree.
you'll give it a try.
Mhm.
So, Ashley, as always, thank you for your insight, your thoughts, and viewers, we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.